September was an interesting month for USMNT players, both at home and abroad, mostly abroad, let's be honest. And so I'm going to do our first ever stock up, stock down report on American players for the month of September. What up, guys? I'm Pete, host of the 11 Yank Show. We talk about everything in the American soccer landscape, particularly the U.S. men's national team. If you're new here, hit subscribe. If you're not new here, smash that like button and leave a comment below. All right, so I've sort of played with the idea of doing a stock up, stock down report on different players, and I thought I'd give it a shot, see if you guys like it, see if it's interesting to you at all, and if it is, leave me a comment below and let me know you want to see this, because potentially I could do this every month if you guys like it. Now, stock up, stocks down are interesting because there's a lot of factors that play into it. It isn't always as simple as this guy played well this month. That can be part of it, but there are lots of other factors. Injuries could play a factor. Things outside of a player's own control could be a factor, like getting called up to the national team. Or, for example, a guy like Malik Tillman, although he has played well, also benefits from the fact that Giovanni Reyna is now injured for an extended period. So his stock automatically goes up as a result of an injury to somebody else. So it isn't always based on just one thing. What makes it fun is there's a lot of factors that play into would you buy stock on this player and where is their stock right now. The other thing that's important to note about stock up, stock down is just because somebody's stock is temporarily up, it's literally just for the month that went by, the month of September. I'm not saying if their stock went up that they should be a, national team regular even, or I'm not saying they should be a starter. I'm not, you know what I mean? And conversely, if a player is stock down, that's literally just for the month of September. I am not saying that this person has lost their spot or we should stop watching them or that they are no longer the player I thought they were. It's just events in that month conspired for that player's stock to drop temporarily. All right, before we get into it, thanks to BetOnline. I still use them. Believe is the code. Guys, are you ready for our first ever stock up, stock down? There's going to be 5 stock up and 5 stock down, and let's start with stock up. First up is Marlon Fossey, the 26-year-old right back from Standard Liège, who made his USMNT debut in September. He was called up the last time way back in 2019 as part of the preparatory Gold Cup squad under Greg Berhalter and has never been called up since. He's done reasonably well for Standard Liège, where he plays in Belgium, but he had a good game against New Zealand, albeit, yes, it's a weak opponent, but apparently he had a good enough game for Pochttino to call him into his first ever roster, and he has essentially beat out the competition. With Serginho Dest injured, he's beat out the competition for third place right back from the likes of Nathan Harriel or Brian Reynolds, because it's basically those 3 guys after Dest and Scally that are fighting for that third place spot. And who knows, he could get looks against Panama, he could get looks against Mexico. He's definitely a different right back to Joe Scally, and maybe Pochttino will want to see him on the field, so that certainly will be very interesting. But certainly his stock shot up during the month of September. Next stock up is Weston McKennie. You can't keep a good man down, and it does seem like when the pressure is on the most, McKennie tends to step up and deliver. After a crazy transfer saga where Juve once again put him on the transfer list and it seemed like didn't want to have anything to do with him, not only were things resolved, but he came on in his first start, scored a goal against PSV, and then earned 3 subsequent starts for Juventus, created multiple chances, including one that should have been a goal in the Champions League for Koop Miners. But he's starting to look like his old self again, and it's interesting with Weston McKennie that he can certainly come back when the pressure is on, and when he feels unwanted or unloved, he tends to turn in his best performances. It does seem like Weston McKennie is a bit externally motivated, because it feels like when everything's going well, that's when he lets his levels drop and his discipline goes and he starts putting on weight again. And then when Juve have to discipline him or say he's done, then he comes back. On the one hand, you have to admire it because it isn't easy to bounce back from that kind of treatment. But on the other hand, it feels like this guy could be an amazing player if he could keep those levels of discipline and focus 100% of the time and not just bring them back when the pressure is really on. But that being said, Weston McKennie absolutely had stock up against September and should start for the USMNT in both games against Panama and Mexico in that box-to-box 8 role. Next stock up is Christian Pulisic, and some people might say, Pete, how can his stock possibly be up? He's still our best player. Yes, but his performances for Milan, right, including 4 goals and 1 assist in the month of September, as well as goals against Inter Milan and Liverpool, and essentially cementing himself early on in the season as probably their most important player and certainly their most important attacker. This would be even higher if he took a penalty in September that Tammy Abraham ended up taking. He's also their set piece taker most of the time on corners and on certain free kicks. He's their penalty taker, will be continuing to take penalties going forward, especially now that Fonseca has laid down the law, and also scored against Panama in September camp. Christian Pulisic is in the form of his life. It is reminiscent of his form for Chelsea during lockdown and a little bit of his form, although his form wasn't so consistent in that Champions League run with Chelsea in 2021. This is a Pulisic that is settled, that is happy, that is a clear starter, and whose confidence is brimming game after game after game. There's no reason to believe that if he can stay healthy, he can't get 30 goal contributions for Milan this season, especially if he's taking penalties and free kicks and corners. Next stock up is Gianluca Busio, and it was always kind of a question with Busio because, we knew that he'd performed well in Serie B for the last season, and the question was, well, is that going to translate into Serie A, especially for a team that's going to be, fighting relegation almost certainly in Serie A, which they are. That being said, Busio has really shown for them. He's been one of their better players, had an accidental goal, it was an attempted set piece that turned into a goal, also won a penalty, has created 6 chances in the month of September, called into Pochettino's first camp. Looks like he belongs in Serie A, and he's versatile. He can play as a 8, he can play as a 10. What I love about Gianluca Busio, the change that I've seen in him over time, is that he's become a lot less passive. He used to be a more passive midfielder on both sides of the ball. Defensively, not always doing the work, but even in possession, playing safe passes, right? Not trying to be the protagonist of games, just sort of being a metronome, making safe passes. But we really start to see him show up in space, demand the ball, not afraid to take players on, not afraid to take risky passes, line-breaking passes, needle-threading passes, and it's been really encouraging to see. Busio always had technique. What he lacked was really that hunger and that drive to show what he can be. And now we're starting to see that. So his stock has certainly gone up. I would not be opposed to giving him a start in this camp, maybe even against Panama. Maybe you give Tillman the start at the 10 against Mexico, since that's a tougher game, and you give Busio Panama. Or maybe you rest Weston McKennie for 1 game and you see what Busio can do at the 8, maybe also against Panama. It would be interesting to see. I hope he at least gets 45 minutes in this camp because I would like to see what he can provide. He did also benefit, certainly, from Gio Reyna getting injured, I think, because for me, he's a guy who can play at the 10 as well. Ricardo Pepi for PSV Eindhoven also was stock up in his only start for PSV Eindhoven. He scored a brace, and, sure, it was against a terrible team, but really that's all you can do for a guy like Pepi who's behind De Jong. When you get on the field, you need to really perform to put any kind of pressure at all on the guy ahead of you, and he certainly did that, right? He was also called into Pochettino's first camp, and Peter Bosz did hint after that game where he scored the brace that he is going to be getting more opportunities compared to last season, where he said at times, De Jong really wanted to play, and perhaps I let him influence me too much, but not this season. This season, we do have to give Pepi more opportunities, so that is really good to see. I hope he can take advantage of those and start putting pressure on De Jong, although, De Jong is still very much in the clear. He can't last forever, right? He is getting older as well, so hopefully Pepi can continue to put that pressure up. It'll be interesting to see if Poch uses him and how he uses him in this camp. Does he start one of the games? Is he clearly behind Sargent? Is he ahead? Does he give him 45 in each game? Interesting to see how Poch uses him and what he thinks of Pepi. I've said before, I think that Sargent is the better overall player, but I do think Pepi's a better finisher than Sargent. So it's going to be interesting to see what Poch thinks and how he uses him. Now let's get to stock down, and this one obviously isn't great. The obvious stock down is Giovanni Reyna, the Dortmund midfielder. September lowlights. Well, he hardly played in the start of the season for Dortmund, despite Shaheen and other reports from BVB being like, yeah, we really like him and we think he's going to be a great contributor this season. And then goes to USMNT camp and gets injured, so misses that camp. misses everything with Dortmund. And then recently, Nuri Sahin comes out and says he's suffered another injury setback, which means he's back to November, potentially, although we'll see. With his history, it is worrying because the last time this happened, he ended up being out for a full year. So Giovanni Reyna, despite all of his talent, I guess this is the second muscle injury that he's had, but the third overall injury, and it's not looking good for him. At the end of the day, if you're not available to play, look, even if he wasn't playing for Dortmund, we know he delivers for the national team. But at the end of the day, if you're injured, the best ability is availability. So we can't rely on him. It seems like it might be a little bit of a Claudio career. We will see. Some people said earlier that this was the case. I think personally that was premature, but I think now with this additional injury and then the injury setback, it's a fair discussion to be had of like, is he just a guy that when he's healthy, when he happens to be healthy and available, you're happy to have him, but you cannot rely on him as like your starter necessarily, as like, okay, Gio's our 10. Gio might be our 10 when he's there, but Tillman and Busio and possibly Aronson, could have the opportunity now to step up with Pochettino because Reyna's going to miss the November camp as well. So we'll see what happens with him, but it's a sad, sad tale of Giovanni Reyna's injuries really putting a damper on what could have been an amazing player. And look, maybe he still will be, right? He's 21 years old. So it's obviously way too early to completely write him off, but certainly the signs are not promising. Matthew Turner has had a rough couple of years ever since Qatar. He went to Arsenal and things did not go well for him there. When he did play, he was poor, went to Nottingham Forest, got even worse. And then he made a bizarre choice. Instead of going and finding somewhere where he would play, he took sort of a lateral move in the transfer window from Nottingham Forest to Crystal Palace. And yes, he went from third place keeper at Forest to second place keeper at Palace, but reality is he's still not playing, and barring an injury, he very likely won't. Hasn't played a single minute for them. On top of that, he was poor in the September camp, and Pochettino did even call him out and was like, look, if you're not playing, especially for goalkeepers, I think this matters more than for outfield players, then this is a handicap and a problem and will not be tolerated. And he might have been speaking more broadly, but it doesn't bode well for Matt Turner, especially if when you do play for the national team, you're poor, right? He was partially culpable on that goal that New Zealand scored, coming off his line, getting caught in no man's land completely unnecessarily. I think Matt Turner, if he wants to be that 2026 starter, which he's still in contention to be just because the alternative options aren't great, is going to have to go somewhere where he's playing. Whether that's the Championship or MLS or the Bundesliga, I don't know where he's going to go. It'll be interesting to see who Pochettino starts in these two games because Matt Turner's stock has been dropping and continues to do so. Ethan Horvath is in an even worse position than Matt Turner. He is the backup, not at a Premier League club, but at a Championship club, and he was brought in to be the starter and then had some terrible mistakes early on in the season. He's been benched for all of the month of September, did not play a single minute, was called into September camp, did not play a single minute. I personally believe this should probably be his last USMNT camp, maybe ever, because, bless his heart, people still have, love for Ethan Horvath, understandably, and I think he endeared himself to a lot of fans with that penalty save against Mexico in the 2021 Nations League final. But since then, what has he really done? Right? Hopped around from club to club, had anywhere from mediocre to poor performances, even at Luton Town, where people say, oh, he helped them to get promoted. Yeah, well, the problem is he actually did. I mean, he did help them to get promoted, but he didn't have the best seasons. There was very good defenders in front of him. And I just don't think Ethan Horvath has the quality to be a USMNT player. And really, the only reason he's in these camps at all is because our goalkeeping options are so poor. I think he should come back to MLS, which is probably his level, sort of like Zach Steffen did, and just try to play. Atlanta United still playing Brad Guzan. So if Brad Guzan can be a professional player in MLS, then certainly Ethan Horvath can. Chris Richards, our best center back, stock down, partially because of the injury, of course, that he suffered, but partially also because he did not look very good in USMNT camp, which kind of followed up on the summer where he didn't look that good. Chris Richards has been sort of awarded the heir apparent. And again, it's like, yeah, we don't have alternative center back options, so he probably gets more leeway than he should. But man has to start stepping up, right? To be fair, he generally has been good for Palace, but then you're playing for the national team, it has not been good. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't start. I'm not saying he isn't probably a clear starter for us, but certainly we do need more competition for Chris Richards' spot because it feels a little bit too comfortable for him sometimes. He'll probably be in that November camp if he's back in time, and we'll get a better look at him under Poch. But I do think Poch is going to want more from Chris Richards, like all USMNT fans should. The final stock down is Yunus Musah, the AC Milan midfielder. His lowlights for September were not great. Played only 41 minutes for Milan, was extremely poor in USMNT camp. And I mean really poor, giving away sloppy balls unnecessarily against both Canada and New Zealand. And it was just really sad to see. Then on top of all of it, he was publicly criticized by Fonseca, who said, look, he's a ball-carrying midfielder. And if he wants to play to really overtake Fofana in the team, he's going to have to be a ball-distributing midfielder. He's going to have to add that to his game. And that is 100% spot on from Fonseca. And to be honest, I think I've said this before, but Musah has not really evolved in the last 4 years. He hasn't improved that much as a player. And that's worrying when you see a guy who, by the way, never gets injured, right? So that's good. He's got that going for him and can be really good when he's driving through midfield and taking players on. But, he's not goal dangerous. His goal and assist stats are terrible for both club and country. Not only that, he just is not a great distributor of the ball. And after 4 years, you think you would have seen some progress in that regard, but we really haven't. And I do think that with a lot of more and more midfielders coming up, Musah does need to be careful because there will be competition in midfield. And if Busio or Tessman or Johnny or, many other midfielders who can also play the 8 are outperforming him at a good level, then he may find himself on the outside looking in, which, to be honest, we should want that. We should want pressure on every single position. And right now we do have it in terms of strikers and midfielders. I'd say there's lots of pressure. In terms of center backs and goalkeepers, not as much. Wingers and fullbacks, there is some, although Dest and A-Rob don't have a ton of pressure at the moment. But yeah, Yunus Musah definitely needs to get his act together because he may not be at Milan past next summer if he doesn't start adding some of these things to his game that Fonseca wants. And for the US, he could be on the outside looking in before long. All right, guys, that is my first ever USMNT Stock Up, Stock Down report for September. If you liked it, if you enjoyed it, leave a comment. Is there anybody else to stock up or stock down that I left out? I only did 5 and 5. I'm sure there were more. So you guys let me know. But also, let me know if you want to do this again in October. All right, I'll see you guys for the Panama game. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Let's go, USMNT. I'll see you then.